Good afternoon, everyone. Just a minute to share my desktop. And get rid of a couple things here. There we go. As John said, one of the things that we're trying to convey today is it really is time for people to embrace the upgrade strategies to move to Macola ES and the product that really is the next version of Macola that you should be running. One of the things I wanted to do is just start. We're running this presentation actually on our cloud server, so I'm going to log in via our Citrix server to show you that. One of the reasons that I asked John to be a part of this today for the hardware side was that was one of the issues we continue to hear as a barrier to upgrading was I don't have a test server, I don't have enough room on my server to be running progression and ES. Not only do you have to have enough room for progression and ES, but you have to have almost triple the room because you've got your live database, a converted database, and a database that we're in the process of converting. So hardware and infrastructure became a barrier for people to do that. And we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to show some workarounds for that. I'm going to launch Macola ES on our cloud server. And show you how that works. It's pretty quick and efficient. In this morning's presentation, I started with Macola ES already running. And someone made mention that it didn't look like anything different than the cloud, so I thought it would be a bright idea to start that way. So I apologize for letting that time out. So really it is just a matter of going into a web page, clicking any of the applications, and you might have seen there we had Macola ES and Excel as other applications that we have access to. And this is Macola ES. This would be the same site, cloud server, that I would be running on my lap or on my iPad with a Citrix client that is made to run on an Apple or an iPad environment. So let me give you a little background on Macola ES for those of you who have not heard this story from me before. If you're running progression right now, you're most likely running a version 7.7. something, which has been around for a long time. Progression actually was introduced in, version 7 of progression was introduced in the 90s. And then over the course of the following 6 or 7 years, went through a lot of iterations. In 2001, Exact acquired Macola. Prior to that, I actually had been invited to sit in a session with Bruce Hollinger, the president of Macola at the time, to evaluate progression version 8, which had a lot of nice features that were necessary, we thought, to be built into the product. And Macola, right in the middle of that process, was acquired by Exact. And Exact had been selling throughout Europe a version of a product called Globe. They sold very successfully. It was a very strong accounting package on the GL, AR, AP side of the equation. And over the course of their acquisition of Macola, decided that it would be a better idea than introducing progression version 8 to sit back and strip down progression to those things that it did well, namely inventory, order entry, and manufacturing, and plug into the place of the progression accounting, the Globe accounting. That took then a long time to get that all plumbed together and make it look like one cohesive product like you see in front of you. But we have been doing this now for several years and have found that it was the right strategy. The strength of order entry, inventory, bills, routers, etc., coupled with a pure accounting package, really brings the best of both to Macola ES. So what you see in front of you is the result. These first 4 or 5 tabs are, in essence, the Globe accounting packages. And behind that, order entry, inventories and bills, and all the manufacturing execution modules are the old progression modules. They have put a nice user interface over the top of it, so it looks like a new, fresh product. It looks like one product from GL through manufacturing. And then they spend a lot of time cleaning up what I call the menu picks, or the interface. If you notice as you go through some of these modules, what you see here are things you really need in your daily work. You have queries, you have maintenance of inventory items and reports and cycle counts and bills of materials and so on. Those things that in progression cloud the menu with setup items that are maybe once in a while or once every during an implementation have all been moved back here under the System tab, and they're still available, but they don't really need to be on the day-to-day menus. So they moved those off and cleaned up the front menu. Within that, they then did things like inventory, stock status reports. I like to talk about that one because now we've got a stock status report that gives us one crystal report with a number of options to run that report, whereas in progression, a lot of those were additional menu picks for the various ways that report could be run. So cleaning up the menu picks from that standpoint was a help to the product. I'm going to go in now to inventory maintenance and show you some other things that are an improvement. In progression, you have the ability to look up customers and items and vendors and GL accounts using a function key. They're somewhat configurable searches, but not to the general user. This is an inventory item search that comes out of the box. And you can see it's sorted here by item description, with item numbers as item number as a second option and a product category as a third option. In order to alpha search this, which in progression takes some function keys, we can just double-click the column and it resorts, and double-click and it resorts. If I would rather look up by item number than item description, I just double-click on that item number and it becomes the primary sort of that screen, and up and down again. You see also there's a product category column. I can add any column that I want to a search, and it becomes part of that search ongoing. So if I wanted to add, if we were making use of these user-defined fields or extra fields, if we wanted to do something like that, activity code is one common one where we want to see all the items activity code, and then we can just tell it only to look at active items. If you notice up above, it added a search then. When I picked that, it added a search box. So I can ask it to show me all my ASM items that are active and tell it to search, and it finds that list of items. These searches are configurable by user and retained in the system by user, so if you log on and you like to look up inventory items this way, or customers by vendor or by area code or zip code, as you make these changes, they're retained for you for the next time that you come into the system. Excuse me. The item that I wanted to just give you a look into and show you the item master screen. Again, because this is progression on the back end, very little has changed in terms of the core functionality of the system versus what's going on the accounting side. So in this particular case, one of the major changes is that the part number went from 15 characters to 30 characters. For some of you, that may seem like no big deal. For those of you who had that as a requirement and were doing things like using alternate description fields for a part number, that's a big deal. So that is one of the largest changes in the distribution side of the software. But I also wanted to show you while we're on this screen the number of things that are here for maintenance. In progression, if you were setting up a new item, you'd do the master file, then you'd step out of that, then you'd go into the item location maintenance selection on the menu and step out of that and so on. And then there are other places to set up an item that are in other modules. For instance, the item vendor is in the purchasing module. Well, what they've done to minimize menu picks is they moved this onto the maintenance screen. So there's the item location setup, and there's the item vendor setup, and item customer setup, and so on. So just a nice way of cleaning up the menu selections and changes. A lot of things have been grouped on tabs versus moving to the next page and having to go all the way through an item to start over again. You can bounce around and do those kinds of things. So that's a major change on the part number and then on the interface that I wanted to share with you. Another change in the system that is on the distribution side is what's called a bill of resource. And really a bill of resource is nothing more than a graphical representation of the bill of material. So you can see all these indented items on the bill. Kind of nice. It's called a bill of resource instead of a bill of material because it also brings in manufacturing items or steps. If you have a manufactured item, it will show you the operations. In this case, this is a POP, a production order processing item, so it's showing you the value-added cost. So depending on the type of item, it would show you down here the processing steps. But one of the major changes in the distribution part, engineering part of the system, is the retention of bill of material history. And in this item, I'm on the wrong item, there we go. The system now tracks bill of material history for revision changes. So if you've changed the bill, it actually creates a historical copy of the bill that you're changing from, changes the revision level of that bill, writes that current revision to the inventory master file for planning and inventory control purposes, and then retains all the bill of material history and revisions backwards so that if someone needs to understand at revision A, how did we make this, or revision B, how did we make this, that's all retained. This was a large requirement for a number of our more engineering type, bill of material intensive type customers, and until Macola ES, that was something that you had to do in a manual way. So those are the two largest changes on the back end of the software that I wanted to show you. The rest really is on the accounting side. And for those of you who want to see a lot of changes on the distribution side, that's about all there was. But the accounting changes, because of the story that I defined for you, are pretty extensive.